Hello everyone, welcome to my 12th episode of G.GOES Live. This is Wednesday again. I missed you guys a week after week. I'm having my guests tonight, Ziad, Saarouh and Elias, aka Stam. Those guys, we talked about them a lot previously. Atomic Circus, not Atomic Pulse anymore. Atomic Circus. It's a duo live band, live performance band. Ziad and Elias, they are using a lot of analog synthesizers, controllers, mainly to perform and not to DJ anymore. So we are going to talk about this band, Atomic Circus, a lot of stuff related to synthesis, how they prepare, and so many other things related to this new way of performance that Elias and Ziad are doing now. And by the way, they previously played at the reunion, and they will be also playing soon at the Skin City, right? Skin City?
Yeah.
Yes. So, how are you, Ziad?
Good.
I'm very, very happy that you are here. We called you out previously, and you're here now with Elias.
Well, it's a pleasure to...
Thank you for coming. And by the way, Ziad got me a gift. I have to show it to you. It's a mug.
It's a mug.
Mug mug, exactly. And from that, you have an idea what's going to be happening tonight and what is it all about. So thank you also, Ziad, for this. Elias, how are you as well?
I'm very good, thank you.
You
Thanks
have
for
some
having
pain
me
in
again.
your back?
Yeah, I've been having some pain for the past 4 days, but I'll be alright. And just to say something, I'm still DJing, not just...
Of course, that's a side project, of course. That's a side new project. We discussed that last time. And let me start by introducing my great friend Ziad. He's a genius, as I see him always, with a lot of things going on in his mind when it comes to music, performance. He started the piano at age of 5, and then he got the very first computer. And he has a story to tell, of course. I love the story, by the way. And then after that, he formed a band. They used to play rock. And then after that, things evolved. And of course, we're going to talk about this and how things got to this point now, where Ziad is performing live on analog synth with too many gears on stage. And we are also going to focus on that a lot. So, Ziad, tell me first of all, how did you get into music in general when you were 5 years old? Did you learn piano, or you were just testing some keys and notes by yourself?
Well, I think it started in a very classical way. Parents need to give an activity to their kids, and I have to thank my mom for insisting that I learn the piano. It was very difficult at first because I couldn't be bothered. There was a lot of discipline in it. I had to know how to position my fingers, memorize a lot of things. But it was important because when I turned 12 or 13, there was this small concert that we did at school, and I was playing this Chopin thing, and I wasn't really thrilled because it's not very popular to play piano at school. Usually if you play tennis or judo or karate, maybe you'll be popular among the kids. But I guess that I played so well that night that everybody stood up and I started clapping, and all my friends put me on their shoulders, and I was extremely successful and popular for one night. And it made me consider music seriously. This can be fun. And I continued playing the piano. And maybe when I was 14, my parents got me a computer.
That's the story that I want to hear now.
It's a story I love to tell because it's one of those things that happen in your life and you never forget. It marked me so much. Maybe it's a silly story, maybe it won't click with anyone, but it clicked with me. So I got this computer, and I was very young.
That was in the early 90s?
No, it was in mid-80s.
Mid-80s too?
Yes, early 90s if you want.
We were kids.
It was in 83 or 84. And my dad got me a computer, a Commodore 128, I think, or 64. And when I first opened it, there was this floppy drive that I needed to insert in it, and it was quite a technological feast to have an integrated floppy drive in the 80s. It was more cassettes. And the first thing that bumped on the screen was the sentence. The computer was, "Hello, what's your name?" So I typed Ziad. And the computer asked me, "Do you think that I'm stupid or intelligent?" And I click, "Intelligent." And it says, "Wrong. I'm stupid. I can only do what you command me to do." And it was such a philosophical concept for a kid like me. Wow. And so it was like some kind of a tutorial, very basic tutorial, but at a certain point I got asked to type play brackets A, C, D, E, whatever. So I didn't know really what
on
it
the
meant.
keyboard.
So I typed play, semicolon, A, B, C, and then it played A, B, E, D, D. It played a melody. I was, what? So I said play, and I tried something else, another succession of notes, and it played them. Oh. And at that moment, I realized that I can command the computer and I can make it do music. So I got all my Bach notation. Bach is a very mathematical composer. Everything is so pure. It's so beautiful. Sentences that answer each other. There's no place for any randomness. And I started inputting the Bach notes on the computer. Play, and then it started playing that. I mean, now people do techno with these things now, and for me.
So it was like the game. People used to, at your age, used to use the computer to play games, and that was your game, playing notes on the keyboard.
Yeah, I rediscovered everybody, Beethoven, Chopin, Eric Satie, everybody. And then I would call my mom, come listen. And all she would listen to was blips and the beep, 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 beep. And I was so excited. And I was excited and I was sad at the same time because there was no one to share this euphoria with. It was such a great thing.
And then you moved to something else, like forming a band.
Well, that's right. That was much later. That was in the late 80s, maybe in 88 or 89. I used to listen to a lot of rock music and Michael Jackson. So, and but I used to listen to AC/DC, Iron Maiden, everybody. And I had somehow a basic rock culture, but that was my universe. That was what I used to listen to. And I met a bunch of guys in the summer of 88 maybe, and we decided to form a band. So we started playing some Beatles songs, and then it evolved. And I used to play keyboards. I had a Casio keyboard, which I had got, I don't know why. It was lying around somewhere. And one day, the bass player who used to work in he was a mechanic, and he cut his fingers. And we were supposed to perform for the first time in our lives a week after, so somebody had to play bass. And since I was the most
the keyboard player, you were only playing the keyboard.
I was only playing, but
so you were into melodies and stuff.
I was into melodies, and piano has a lot of bass with the left hand. So I went to Burj Hamoud and I bought a $50 bass. And a friend of mine gave me a VHS. He said, "Yeah, watch this VHS. You'll learn how to play bass." And it turned out to be this excessively famous bass player who died, Jaco Pastorius, was like the god of bass players. You can never play like Jaco. And I would watch the video, and I said, no, I'll come up with the lyrics myself. And that's how I learned to play bass.
And you started with bass.
Yes.
Now, so you added to your talent, and now you have the piano, the keyboard, the bass, and later on moved to some other stuff also.
Exactly.
By doing some synthesis that we will be talking a lot about tonight.
Bass was a catalyst actually, because at a certain point when I wanted to play bass and keyboard at the same time, I had to choose this or that. And we'll talk about that later on, but that's how I started to synthesize bass sounds so that I could play bass grooves on the keyboard. And
great.
Yeah.
And by the way, Ziad and Elias, they formed Atomic Circus maybe a year ago.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
Islam, Elias,
we came up with the name six months ago.
yeah,
But yeah, we decided to start the project.
So how did you
maybe
meet
a year
Ziad?
ago.
How did you think of this? How did you How did it all start?
I actually, a friend of mine, pianist Pim Van Harten, called me to tell me he knows that I liked to buy gears, and told me that there was this guy who wanted to sell 303, and I was looking for one. So he sent me the number, and I had a discussion on the phone with Ziad. He was like, "Come check the studio. We'll discuss it on the spot." And so I went to that studio.
It was like a sudden
I got
flame
into
directly connected.
Yeah.
I got into a crazy studio with like tons of machines, and we started like talking about music, listening to music, you know, just in general. Then I made him hear a few of my tracks. And then at some point he was like, you know, we should do something together. I'm like, of course, man. I'd be more than happy to do that. And this is how it all started, actually.
And by the way, for the people who are watching from abroad as well, Elias is one of the top players, like the key players in the industry, in the electronic music industry in Lebanon. Elias has a huge biography, and he has been DJing and producing since ages now. He took over some of the most important clubs in Lebanon. He traveled all around the world, and now he has a new residency in Berlin.
I mean, not really a residency, but I'm gonna be between here and Berlin for the coming year. I'm looking forward to that.
But the good thing about the magical thing is that you met with Ziad, and you both come from a different musical background. So you used to play this underground music with a touch of, you know, it's all electronic music at the end, but you merged with Ziad, who also comes from a different background in music, and that's when the magic happens. And now with your performances, you're trying to merge different styles together. And tell me more about the direction you're taking with this band.
It's true that we come from two different schools, but still, when I met Ziad was doing electronic music as well. So, but also, you know, he's a musician. He plays the keyboard, the bass, and a bit of drums as well. And yeah, I thought just combining these two different schools together and trying to do something different, you know, something that reminds the old generation and the new generation of like the music we grew up on. So.
And that's purely you're dealing with an electrical signal. You're dealing with full creation. You're no longer now using in this Atomic Circus, like mainly when you are live on stage, you're not like using a VST or some emulation of a synthesizer. You're just actually doing it live. And I think Ziad, I really always enjoy talking to you about the philosophical aspect, because one time you told me I'm also married to my synth, or to how I make love to how I create music, and you said this is something so orgasmic to me. So I took those keywords, and I want you to tell me more about this. What do you feel when you just start creating things from this machine, that you're working with an electrical signal and you're just oscillating frequencies, sounds, etc.?
Well, this concept of creation is a very deep and important concept. Anyone has it. Actually. You don't need to be a musician to experience it. But the fact of transforming a very raw material into something that, in my opinion, of course, very subjective opinion, is outstandingly beautiful, is a process that transcends you. Basically, what I like to do is transmute things. It doesn't matter if it's analog or digital or whatever. It's beside the point. Just the fact that you have this machine that can do anything, but if you don't know how to operate it, if you don't have the skills to operate it, then it won't do anything. And I wasted a lot of time in my musical career, or in my musical experience. I wasted a lot of time listening to presets. I used to listen to what people would do and fall in love with the preset, and then spend hours playing this preset and forgetting what this machine would do. And the idea of taking a very basic signal and shaping it, sculpting it, doing something amazing out of it is what drives me. And when we play live, most of our machines are either analog or digital, but it's hardware. There is nothing that is.
There's no CDJ.
No, even though the concept of DJing is fascinating, and people are making music using music as instruments. It's I don't think that I can do that. It's fascinating. But to come back to synthesis and creating your own sounds, there is this perverse satisfaction to have a sound that you know that you created. No one else would ever be able to create, even if you use the same settings, because any twist of the knob will dramatically change everything. And it's such a beautiful thing to spend hours and hours creating things that will evaporate out of a sudden. It's as if you create this ghost out of electricity that is standing in front of you. You don't know when it will disappear, and the moment you turn the machine, the ghost disappears, never to come back again. And when you sleep at night, you're happy because you consider that you deserve this gift that giving sounds, music. I get very passionate, and sometimes I say silly things when I talk about it, but it's truly amazing to create something from scratch. And if anybody is listening and spends a lot of time on VSTs and presets, please try to do your own sounds, even if it's the stupidest sound on earth, and you'll feel like you
it's
got
creation
$1
at
million.
the end of the day. And I bet when you are sleeping also, you're dreaming of how to patch a new
Oh, man.
sound.
I can be sure of that.
My
I'm gonna tell you something.
Yeah.
I get messages at 3 a.m. in the morning like, I found this, I got a solution for that, and I'm like, holy shit, he's still thinking about this non-stop, you know?
And Elias, by the way, how do you guys how do you prepare for a certain workflow? Like how do you decide what synths to use, when, what is your setup about? What do you basically like to take over, and what, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
if you like to play on drums mainly, or leave some musical for the keyboard to Ziad, or you just play on everything?
No,
together?
listen, I leave the music side for Ziad since he's the musician, you know. But again, it took us time to decide which machines to use and to find the right setup to be able to have a nice, an easy workflow. We basically start sound designing stuff after deciding what's the setup going to be, even though we're always upgrading or removing a machine and adding another one that could provide us more control over the sounds and everything. But still, it starts with sound design, agreeing on the sounds, on the sequences, and then how we play them. We just jam, you know, and we get used to each other, we follow each other. Sometimes he's leading, sometimes I'm leading, so it's just a feeling.
and sometimes the machines are leading, and
It's true.
we try to.
That's
and
more-
and we're
adapt.
following.
So, where do you find yourself more, Elias? Like, for example, if you want to start designing something, what is your best gear out of the equipment that you have already? Where do you start? Or it's always dynamic, it's always
I'm
changing?
not gonna say I have the best gear, you know. It depends. You can make any, like you said, you just create from scratch, and if you think it sounds good, it sounds good. It could be from a Moog or a Roland or Arturia. So it really depends.
So how does it look like, your setup nowadays? What does it have? If you can mention what gear you have already. I know there are
Which
too many.
we just changed today.
We changed a lot of things.
Changed,
I'm gonna let Ziad talk about it. We had a lot of I'm not gonna say argument, but a lot of
So what are the
debating about that we should have the less machines possible. Then we
Yes.
added more machines.
especially
and
when you play live, or even in the studio when you want to jam to create something?
no,
for them?
when we jam in the studio, it's our live setup. So
You always
basi-
prepare. You always prepare for the live jamming when you are also in the studio. So
We just
take
create.
every-
We
you
create in
create.
the studio and we jam. We don't prepare how we're gonna play this at reunion.
yes,
At
of course, of course.
We play the set in the studio. At reunion, it's gonna be different.
Different.
It's
But
the
you
maybe
decide on some, for example, what gear to choose, how to
Of course.
how to plug them, and that's of course I'm gonna ask Ziad about it. It's myself also. I'm very interested. I downloaded last time the picture you put before reunion. You
Yeah.
posted a photo with all the gear, how they are mapped,
Yeah, the
and you were
diagram.
drawing the routing and etc. So how do you start? Like, if you want to think of like setting up your the gear for this specific live show, how do you start? with
So our setup is fixed. Whatever is in the studio is the same that we use live on stage. There are no additional things that we use in the studio. The setup is centered around one main brain synthesizer, which is the virus. The virus has a particularity, it's multi-timbral, so it's as if you had 16 synthesizers in one. And you can, so we create 3 or 4 sounds on the virus. Usually our bass sounds are programmed on the virus. Then we have a sequencer that sequences 2 or 3 sounds from the virus. And these sounds provide the backbone of the track. And in parallel, there's another sequencer, which is a drum sequencer, which Elias programs to come up with a beat. So basically, it is a simultaneous process. While Elias is fiddling around and trying to come up with a beat, I'll be trying to play along with him a very, a very basic sound, but trying to create a groove, also a basic groove. And then once the two are locked, we do sound design for the bass, then we add a few elements, and that's it. All the rest, so I have a Matrix Brute, which plays lead. I improvise on it, it's not sequenced. I have a digital piano and a Hammond organ. Well, actually, there are the Yamaha Reface series, small. I love the sound, but I hate the keyboards because I don't understand this thing with tiny keys. How can you play a Hammond solo on tiny keys? But
So
they're fun.
You plug another keyboard in MIDI to
No,
control it?
no,
or
no,
you
no,
just
no,
keep
no.
it?
Well, actually, this limitation makes me play simple, extremely melodic lines. So it fits the style, especially now that we're doing a down-tempo set, more housey, and so it's quite melodic. So I cannot play very fast now with the small keys. So I play a chord from here, a chord from there. We added a looper, which can go up to 64 bars, a audio looper. So I play a few things on the piano and on the Hammond organ, then I keep them looping, then come back. That's mainly it's the setup in terms of machine is simple, but it's very complex in terms of routing because you have MIDI clocks and MIDI and CC going left and right, controlling all the machines so that they are synced all the time. Now with the upgraded setup version 2,
Effectors,
with the version 2,
PC.
the simpler we do it, the harder it becomes because it's simple in machines. Then let's do this. Okay, so let's hook that. Let's do this, and it becomes a nightmare of cables that might attack us someday. But it's quite easy. So we got one main sequencer for melodies, another sequencer for drums, a looper for things that come and go, a main synthesizer for the 3 bass sounds, and then we mute and unmute these very simple things that form the building block of each track, and then we start jamming all over the place.
By the way, let me tell you something, you guys. When Ziad and Elias came here, like an hour before we started the G.GOES Live, we were just jamming here in the studio, and I noticed something, that those guys don't really talk to each other when they play. It's like they create this very, very beautiful connection without even looking at each other. It's magical, and I always wonder about this. And really, Elias, in like maybe 1 minute, he created a drum pattern that took me somewhere else, and while Ziad was playing a bass line, and they got synced together right away. It's too magical. And so how important is this, Elias, when you want to perform with someone? How important is this connection that you have on like a spiritual or another dimension. You just communicate together without even looking at each other.
I just think it's unique, you know, because it rarely happens. Usually, I said it a few times before, we talk when there's something very important or a problem that's happening. But usually, it's just like following each other, you know. And the more we play together, the more we get used to. He feels when I'm gonna do a breakdown. I know exactly, or not gonna say I know exactly. I just feel that he's gonna do variations in a bass, and you know. So it's like that.
How was your first experience live and the reunion?
It was stressful. It was stressful. We spent 6 hours setting up.
But for me, it was.
He was way more stressed than I was, but I was also very stressed.
You have a studio. You know that most of the times when you press play, nothing happens. And then you have to troubleshoot. Oh, that's because I didn't put the MIDI channel. Then it takes you 3-4 minutes, sometimes an hour, just to know why it doesn't work.
Sometimes it's just a mute button.
It happened here, by the way. It's a funny story. I was giving a class one day, and there was no sound. So because you see a lot of technology, so you start thinking too deep, and there was no sound coming out. And then I was checking the cables, checking the settings of the sound card, checking everything. And the student was so new, he was so raw. And he was like, Mo, the speaker is not turned on, so it wasn't plugged in electricity. That's why we didn't have sound. So yeah, when you are subject to a lot of technology, sometimes you really miss the simple things. Did anything happen, like some complications?
Thank
because
God.
it was the very first
Thank God,
performance.
none, but we prepared so much. We went 6 hours before time. We set up everything. Then the day before, Elias and I, we removed everything, and then we reinstalled everything 1 meter apart, just to know if it works.
Yeah, just to see if it's gonna work.
And the stress was that there were 2 huge bouncers, mountain-like bouncers, who took all our equipment, plugged, and put it on the DJ booth. It was a 2 meter strip, maybe. And I wasn't looking. Yes, did I put it? It's there. And then you have to perform. Everybody is waiting to know what's the fuss all about. These 2, are they clowns? Circus? Are they what's going on? And then Elias presses play, and there is one routine. Before he presses play, I have to press on a button on Ableton, because Ableton
to send the clock.
No, Ableton receives the clock from our setup and then sends it back, because we have a few effects. And if I forget to click on this button, all the delays will be unsynchronized. It's going to be hell. And so we have a checklist where we need. No, but thank God, it was an amazing experience.
So you use Ableton as an effect unit, or do you also have something going on in Ableton?
Just an effect unit.
Just an effect unit.
It's so the MX1, which is our mixer and main clock source, sends audio to Ableton, which sends back audio to each track on the MX1. The audio gets processed in the meantime, and that's it.
So that's like send, return?
Yeah, I mean, there's a special mode on the MX1, which is called live mode, Ableton mode. And each track on the MX1 will have its counterpart in Ableton. So
Ableton is sending back to your MX1.
Exactly. So the sound goes from the MX1, then back to the MX1 via Ableton on all tracks. And this allows us to put some compressors, some delays, some very small things that we don't control at all. Maybe a few delays that Elias controls. But this is what holds our setup on this MX1 thing with Ableton.
Great. Too many machines, too many things going on.
Yeah.
By the way, Elias is launching his mini course about synthesis at Per-vurt, and we talked about this in a previous G.GOES live episode. You can watch it, of course, on YouTube playlist and on the Per-vurt page. We have a special playlist for G.GOES live series. You can watch them all. And just a reminder as well, this is going to be every Wednesday at 10 p.m. A Wednesday I will be solo, and a Wednesday I will be with guests. And with my solo sessions, I will be discussing or answering your questions about anything related to music production, DJing, performance, etc. So many of you asked me about synthesis because they are not really they don't know much about it, and who else than those guys to ask? So when it comes to the technical side of producing and oscillating and creating sounds from an analog synth or even a VSTI and software synth, it all has to do with a certain chaining or certain. You start with an oscillator and then you go from one component to other. So if you can tell the people a little bit, like a small brief story about this road that you take from the time you start oscillating, and what is an oscillator in the first place?
I don't know who remembers from the people watching us the old school telephones. The telephone that it used to have a signal toot, and then we need to use the dial to call someone. This toot sound is the oscillator. An oscillator basically is something that vibrates, that makes the air move around us, and the faster it vibrates, the faster this movement is translated into sound. And in a synthesizer, you start with an oscillator, which is the sound source, and then the signal gets shaped into three other main steps to come up with the final sound. This is called subtractive synthesis, and as you know, but for those who don't know, subtractive synthesis is like someone sculpting. You take this big slab of rock, which is ugly, and then you start working on it, bringing it, like sculpting it to come up with the Venus of Milo or whatever. And you come up with something amazingly beautiful and ethereal. So this is subtractive synthesis. You take a very simple tone. It can be a square wave, which will have a certain edgy sound. It can be a sine wave. So this is the way the sound will move into air. So there are 3 or 4 main waveforms, wave shapes. Then this, once you are happy with the wave shape, with the frequency of it, if it's bass, if it's trebly, whatever, then you will sculpt it a little bit with the filter, remove some frequencies. This is why it's called subtractive. You remove frequencies, you find the frequency that you like, so you have a sound that is more like a flute, if you're using a triangle or a sine wave. Then you start shaping the way it behaves over time. So you will use an envelope generator, which will affect how much time does the sound take to reach its full volume, how much time does it stay at the full volume, and how much time does it go to a new level or decay. Let's say, for example, a piano sound. When you press on the piano, the sound goes to full volume very fast, will stay for a few seconds, and then will die. So this is the envelope. A string sound will reach its full volume very slow, and then it will stay a lot of time there. So the envelope generator allows us to shape the sound in order to make it sound in time the way we want it to. And then the last step is to modulate it. You can use a robot to turn the knobs at your place. So a robot can take the filter and open it and close it. And this is an LFO, which is a special kind of oscillator that we cannot hear because it oscillates very slowly. And you can use it to control any function of the synthesizer that allows to be controlled. And usually these are electrical signals that interact with that affect each other and that influence each other. So basically this is how you synthesize a sound. And there are certain synthesizers that got very famous because they were so easy to program, but so powerful with the quality of their tones, like the Moog Model D, or like, well, in your studio you have a lot of amazing synthesizer, like the Roland Gaia is amazing. It's a synth that is very easy to use, and if someone wants to get into synthesis, it's always very important to get a very simple synthesizer. Know your way around these 3 or 4 building blocks, and then whatever synth you will look at, you just understand how it works.
Yeah.
But don't buy a Matrix board because your wife will divorce you.
By the way, Ziad talked about a lot of like the main titles of this synthesis, and if you want to know more about it, you can go back in the G.GOES Live series, me and Elias Tam, we discussed this in details. Elias talked about the LFO, the envelopes, ADSR, talked about the VCF, the VCO, which is also, we talked about all these things in detail, so you can also watch this episode. I think it was G.GOES Live
3 weeks ago?
maybe 7 or
it's
you can find
my
it.
second.
You can find it. You can find it on the playlist, etc. Elias, let me ask you one question, not about the synthesizer, like the keyboard synths, because I always, when we are in the studio together, or when I see you you play, I am always fascinated with the way you program drums instantly, using your favorite TR-8 as well. So tell me more about it. Is it because you are already a DJ, or how is it like when you just directly program something which is too complete for me? That's my opinion. And chapeau. How do you do it? Where do you start? Do you start, for example, with do you know many patterns, or you just figure it out?
No, of course I don't know patterns. It's just improvisation as well. So I just try a few stuff. Always try with the kick drum, usually. Then sometimes it's the hi-hat and the snare. If it sounds good, it sounds good. You know, sometimes it takes time to just find one pattern that fits with what that fits in the track. So again, I played a lot of music, listened to different beats, and especially electronic music. So I have an idea of how I want it to sound, you know, if I want it to sound like it's broken beats or just 4-on-4 steady beats. Yeah, it depends.
And do you always try to work your drums relatively to what you have on the side, like a bass line? Do you like produce the drums in relationship with other sounds?
Sometimes yes, sometimes we could decide about a sequence or other sounds, and then I feel like this sequence on the drum machine isn't sounding so good, so I just try all over again to find the right groove, so to be able to make it tight, and you know, I'm just satisfied. Once I'm satisfied, and Ziad is satisfied, of course, because he also has to agree on the groove. Sometimes he doesn't feel whatever I'm doing. So that's it. Once we agree on the rhythm, and also sometimes it's the bass, it goes well with the whole groove, then we go for it.
when maybe our first or second jam, Elias and you know, he was I think it was first time was on the 606, the TR-606.
It was the TR-8 and the 606.
Was it?
Yes,
both.
It was both.
It was both.
And we had the Nord drum.
Yeah, yeah. It has always been very complicated. And when I'm composing, usually alone in my studio, I put a click track, you know, and as long as I know how to count to 4, 64 times, I'm happy. And so I usually do very basic 4/4 things, and then comes Elias with all the syncopations you can think of. And I used to play rock, and the kind of rock that I listen to is, you know, is 4/4, and well, it's still 4/4 the way Elias does it, but it was surprising, and it made me play in a totally different style. It made me actually become a better keyboard bass player, because I had to adapt to that. And he comes up with these grooves that I can never think of, and as you said, he's very fast.
He's very fast, and it's just like it's fascinating.
But so he comes up with a groove in 5 or 6 seconds. Then he spends maybe 4 hours working on the decay of the hat.
Tuning this.
Tuning. And then it's like Chinese torture. So you have to find something that to occupy yourself. So you prefer it like this or like that?
Any.
Like that? You pick one.
And
but
now, what is the plan now? I know you have a gig coming soon coming. Next, maybe.
Yeah, hopefully in the next couple of weeks.
Next couple of weeks, the date we're waiting for the confirmation. It's we've also created like new tracks as well with a new setup.
Yeah,
as
but this
well.
is
We've added stuff.
It's very this new incarnation is very exciting because now the tracks, in order for us to play them the way we want to play them, are taking maybe 15 minutes each. They're very long. The set is becoming very long and very exciting. There are so many toys for us to occupy ourselves while the machines are doing their thing, and it's beautiful because it's taking our music to a place where I couldn't have dreamt that. Really, it's you'll have a sneak preview after that. We'll show you something.
I'm lucky, you see. And how do you define the sound now that you're going, or do you go from sound to sound, or what's the main sound? Is it more into disco or more into like?
I would
what
just
is
say
it?
electronic music.
Electronic music. So
Electronic
that's
music. It has
something
all the
maybe new.
influences: Oriental, disco, funk, jazz, blues,
You know,
rock, everything. Right?
I think that for me, when people say electronic music, what they actually mean is electronic dance music. Pink Floyd is electronic music. Klaus Schulze, Van Drelis, everybody that is into synthesizer does electronic music. We're electronic music performers. It's true that now we have a lot of disco-y stuff going on because I suddenly got liberated of a certain machine that was holding my hand. So now I'm replaying all the grooves by hand, and well, it's nice because
It's definitely nice.
we're like kids when we talk about that because you have to see the way where they start jumping and when the bass line creates itself.
And you have to see when we start arguing because one is liking the sound and the other one doesn't like the sound and trying to convince the other one that no, trust me, it's a good one. No, it's not. You can do better.
And by the way, do you record that also on multi-track or not?
Each rehearsal we do, and we have a rehearsal every day. I think the days where we don't rehearse is when I'm abroad or when Elias is abroad, but we have a rehearsal every day. They're taped on video, and they're taped and they're recorded on stamps, 2 tracks or sometimes more than that. And we watch the videos, we listen to what we do, we get overly critical. I upload it to Elias at 4 in the morning, 800 megabytes of an hour and a half set, and then Elias sends me a message at 6. You know, it's beautiful, man, but I know when he starts like that. But we should. So next day, another machine is installed, and
There's always a but.
this is how we progress. We do practice a lot, and this is maybe to answer one of your questions. We don't talk to each other a lot because we got so used to play together. It's like husband and wife, but on a musical level. There is this musical and artistic trust between both of us. And you know, when I jam with Elias, sometimes when we were kids, we would play the piano over a backing track. We used to buy backing tracks, guitar tracks, and jam. And it's as if I'm jamming over music I love. So Elias does his thing, and I'm happy playing to follow Elias. And I hope that it's the same with him. Maybe he doesn't listen to what I do.
And are you planning to, for example, are you thinking of maybe releasing an album of those jamming sessions, or you take some of the tracks?
We've actually had a
reproduce
lot of
them?
discussions about that, and I think we both agree that we should be releasing our tracks. I mean, there wouldn't be we wouldn't do any arrangement for in the box. It would be
Just taking
recording different takes and deciding which one is the best.
So it will be a pure an album with just recording yourself, nothing in the box,
yeah,
nothing,
just feeling and
Wow.
instinct. And
with all the happy mistakes that happen also.
Well, there is an argument against that. I want to take it even further. I want to commit. So Elias says, man, it would be cool if we record the entire set and a few takes of each track, and the one we like, we commit to it. And I understood wrong. I said, yeah, that would be great. Super. So we'll have a stereo out, and this will be the track. Khalas, we just master it. And that's how I understood. And this is not what he meant. Actually, he wanted to record multi-track, our performance, then mix it. But I would really like to take the challenge of looking at people in the eye, our peers, people who know about this business more than I. Look at them in the eye and tell them, this album, we recorded it live. There was no mixing involved. There was nothing involved, just mastering.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's an ongoing discussion.
I agree actually with you on that. When you're recording just an album live that is mixed, but when you're gonna release track or 2 tracks in an EP, it's maybe better to than record on
Facebook, your comments. I would like to record.
So maybe you can decide.
Can you let us know, please?
But now with the modern state of technology, with the machines that we have to perform live, we are having audio quality that is on par with what we have on the laptop. Now we're getting a new sequencer, the MPC Live, which 10 years ago, people would record an entire album on an MPC, would mix it on the MPC, and would send it. So this discussion is ongoing, and we're happy having this discussion. It's a nice discussion. It makes us think.
So if you would, for example, I know it's a very hard question, and it's always hard to answer it, but if you, for example, would think of your top maybe 5 gear, whatever they are. It's a hard question, I know.
Well, the top 5 that I have today aren't the same that I had a month ago. So my current top 5.
Your current top 5.
My current, I'm totally madly head over heels in love with my Matrix Brute. It is the best synthesizer on earth. It's a future classic. It's a current classic. It's just amazing what you can do with this hell of a machine. Maybe it's the synthesizer that I have spent the most time in the short. I've only had it for a month. 3 months?
Before Africa. While
a month and a half, maybe.
End of May.
End of May, maybe.
Yeah,
and a month. But I have played on it more than I have played on all my other machines, night and day.
It's a beast.
It's a beast. It's a lover. It can scream. It can whisper. It can shout. It can slap you. It can caress you. It can dictate things. It can. People will not understand because there's what's Matrix Brute. Maybe they think it's a big brute that comes and slaps me, but it's an amazing synthesizer, and you guys have to check it out. It really is the crème de la crème. My second best is the Virus. It's a synthesizer that allows you to program any kind of sound, and it's a synthesizer that hasn't changed for the past 10 years. It is still cutting edge. All producers use it for a reason. It's better than a VST, even though it is a VST in a box. I mean, it's fully digital, but it's amazing the amount of control and how elegant the interface is. I love my drum brute. It is my best drum sequencer for live performance. I love it. Elias hates it. But he hates it. I know why. Because he came, he had a quick listen, and then I didn't have enough time to properly introduce them to each other. But I'm sure
I'm
that
give you the chance.
But I'm sure
that
if I'm passionate about something, there has to be a reason. I'm not and it is a very elegant machine. And what I like about it is that for once there's a drum machine that doesn't try to emulate an 808 or a 909 or
it has its own.
It has its own sound. You can like it or not, but respect for having the guts to come up with an analog machine that has its own distinct sound, and such a joy to play. for live performance, you can do so many things with it. So that's my number 3. Number 4, do I have a number 4? Well, number 4 is, well, I have 2, but I didn't receive them yet. I'm receiving them in 3 days. So they cannot be my favorite because I need to live with them. That would be the Teenage Engineer OP1 and the MPC Touch Live.
MPC Live.
Ah, I'm in love with my Electribe, which is our main sequence.
Now
here.
you're gonna list them all.
Saarouh 4.
It's endless.
It's endless. I love them all. I love them all.
Yes,
Like,
what's your
Okay.
favorite? Maybe top 5 also?
Top 5.
TR8 for sure. I'm really sure about
TR8,
that. And the Matrix.
TR8. I mean, there is also a few machines that I don't own. Neither Ziad, but I've tried them at some friend's place. I have Prophet 8, which I really like. MS-20. I love it. I have the 707. It's a beautiful drum machine for house music and disco. And I don't know, I would say the Virus as well, because most of what we've been doing in our tracks, the core is the Virus. So, and Ziad convinced me, because I
no,
wasn't
it's not-
convinced.
Yeah, the day Elias and I discovered finally how to route the LFO anywhere we want on the Virus was the day that we maybe got married to the Virus. We discovered it at the same time, and it was amazing.
So, you guys, Atomic Circus, we reached the end of the show, and we had so many things to talk about. Unfortunately, we did not have the time to take your questions, and we promised that we would go through if you had any questions, of course, and answer them. So, you guys, thanks for joining me and my guests, as always. I love you so much, and I will see you also next Wednesday. Cheers.
Ciao.